who are 3 players the Oakland Raiders could ultimately end up taking with that #1 overall pick. The first guy coming up here is a defensive player out of Houston, and I think it's Ed Oliver. If you watch Ed Oliver, you're going to see the unbelievable talent, and you're going to see that he's raw. But ultimately, I think he's going up against the weak competition. That's why you see the 2018 stats there. Like, he's been blowing up defenders. And even when you talk about career stats, Ed Oliver, he's got him. But overall, Oliver's been excellent. And even though the Raiders don't really need a defensive tackle, I think when you're looking at the team, ultimately, if you can add talented players, Ed Oliver's sitting there on the board. He's not terrible, but still a guy that, you can keep in mind. Here are career stats: 31 games, 189 tackles, 52 tackles for a loss, and 13.5 sacks. Pretty good numbers for a defensive tackle, especially Ed Oliver. Even though he's from a small school, I get the small school might scare away some people, but when you're looking at Ed Oliver, do not be shot, or don't be afraid of Ed Oliver, because he is a really talented player ultimately. So I promise you that. Again, I know they don't need a defensive tackle, but guess what? You're about to get another defensive tackle, because I think when you're talking about prospects, there's a player right now who's going a little bit under the radar in terms of prospects, and I think Quinnen Williams of Alabama, 6'4", 289 pounds. He's really starting to rise up draft boards, and ESPN's NFL draft guru Mel Kiper Jr. said Williams is surging towards the top of the big board and could challenge Ohio State's Nick Bosa for the #1 overall pick in 2019. Again, the Raiders do not need a defensive tackle, but when you have one win, you don't necessarily get to be picky unless you have the #1 overall pick, right? So, but in his career stats, he is only a sophomore. 19 games, he's got 69 tackles, 20.5 tackles for a loss, and 7 sacks. He is just a big dude in the interior. He's really going to be able to help the Raiders' run game. He's also going to be able to take on double teams, a lot like what Maurice Hurst has been doing this year, and maybe free up some of the younger guys on the outside like an Arden Key to maybe get a little bit more pressure on the quarterbacks against the Raiders. But the #1 guy for me, and you're going to hear his name a bunch on the Raiders Report this entire offseason, it's Nick Bosa. I think the Raiders, if they have the #1 overall pick, they need to go out and get Nick Bosa. Now, I get Nick Bosa hasn't played a single snap this year, and for a lot of people, that's scary. But when watching Ohio State, I think there's no doubt that Nick Bosa is the perfect fit for the Oakland Raiders. They need a defensive end. The Raiders are ranked dead last in sacks. Heck, there are 9 NFL players who have more sacks than the Oakland Raiders as an entire team. And his 2017 stats, you can see there, he's got 8.5 sacks. Like, Nick Bosa, you insert him into the lineup, it is an instant game changer. Here are his career stats. So, at Ohio State, 29 games, 77 tackles, 29 tackles for a loss, and 18 sacks. He's got a motor, and he's just a non-quit player, an absolute Groot and grinder. And I think if the Raiders do have the #1 overall pick, it's going to be Nick Bosa. So why did I give you 3 defensive players? It's because the Raiders' defensive line is not necessarily talented or very experienced. Frosty Rucker's getting up there in age. Sure, Mo Hurst and Hankins have actually been pretty solid in the middle, and I like Arden Key's upside, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things like they need help on that defensive front. There's a reason why they're ranked dead last in sacks, and when you just talk about players, you're talking about Nick Bosa, Ed Oliver, and Quinnen Williams for me. But, Raider Nation, I want to know from you. Who do you want the Raiders to draft #1 overall in the 2019 NFL Draft? I want you to comment below. Is it Bosa? Is it Oliver? Is it Williams? Heck, is it somewhere else? Maybe it's Justin Herbert. I'm kidding. Who do you want the Raiders to draft #1 overall? For me, I'm saying Nick Bosa, because I think he's going to be the #1 overall pick for the Oakland Raiders in 2019. If you want to bet on the Raiders this season, or heck, next season when hopefully they're winning a little bit more games, you can do it at BetDSI, the world's #1 sportsbook, chatsports.com/bet. You're going to use promo code LIVE120 for 120% deposit.